Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein recently appeared on BBC News, and in this interview that she had, she was polite as usual. She articulated her policy positions well, but the BBC host, much like the other hosts of news outlets, was incredibly rude to her, even though she was very nice to him. He was smug, and it was very apparent that he did any and everything he could to vilify her and try to make her look bad, but thankfully, he fell flat on his face. Take a look.
On fracking, you oppose fracking, and yet there are said to be between 2 million and 2.7 million American jobs linked to fracking. Does that make sense to be opposed?
That's why we are proposing a Green New Deal, like the New Deal that got us out of the Great Depression. We will create 20 million jobs on an emergency basis to create the jobs in clean renewable energy, in a healthy and sustainable food system, and in public transportation. So absolutely, we are guaranteeing that displaced workers will have an equivalent job, which actually is healthy for them. Instead of putting their lives at risk when they walk in the door of that fossil fuel job in that refinery or on that fracking site, they're going to have a healthy job, which is actually good for them, their communities, their children, and their future.
Good for them to make them unemployed first before employing them somewhere else. You want free college tuition, a cancellation of student debt, Medicare for all?
No, that's why we're calling for a Green New Deal.
Sure. Free college tuition, cancellation of student debt,
unemploying anybody.
Medicare for all. The cost of that a number?
Yes. In fact, the Green New Deal pays for itself in health benefits alone. Free public higher education, we know from the GI Bill, returns $7 to the public coffers for every dollar that is put in. So if you do this right and you cut back on the bloated and dangerous military, we have more than enough money to pay for what we actually need in order to survive. We can have an America and a world that works for all of us.
You talk about a bloated military, which brings me to my next question. You're talking about cutting military spending by 50%. You're talking about ending combat operations against ISIS. Are you really suggesting that in a world that's probably as dangerous as it's been for as long as people can remember?
Well, we have a 15-year track record now for this policy of bombing and shooting against terrorism. And what it does is create worse terrorist threats. ISIS came out of the catastrophe of both Libya and Iraq. So let's actually look at the track record. What we need to do, in fact, is to impose a weapons embargo on the area. And the U.S. can lead the way because we are supplying the majority of arms to all sides, in fact. We need to absolutely put a wet blanket on the Middle East instead of applying a flamethrower, which is what we have been doing. We need a weapons embargo, and we need to put a freeze on the bank accounts of those countries that are continuing to fund terrorist enterprises.
Okay.
According to Hillary Clinton and a leaked State Department memo, that's particularly Saudi Arabia.
You have no experience. That's another of the major criticisms. How do you address that?
Actually, I have lots of the right kind of experience. I have experience working with the social movements, with grassroots groups, in order to change legislation and regulation. Everything from cleaning up our coal plants here in Massachusetts, to shutting down polluting incinerators, to changing laws and regulations that impact our health. So what I don't have is the experience taking money in a corrupt system through the back doors and doing favors for Wall Street and the health insurance companies. But I have exactly the kind of experience that we need in order to move forward with a transformative agenda for people, planet, and peace over profit.
You've been scathing about the other two main candidates. You call Hillary Clinton a warmonger, you call Trump a bigot, but how do you plan to combat them over the coming months, given that you're practically getting no primetime airtime there in America?
And that is exactly the question. There's a big campaign now to open up the debates, to actually make the debates an institution that serves the American public. Right now, the debates are controlled by guess who? The Democratic and Republican parties.
But there are rules. They talk about 15% and you're nowhere near 15%.
Well, there's a movement actually to challenge that 15% as a strategy whereby the political establishment silence opposition. We call that tyranny in other countries. If people have a choice on the ballot that could numerically win the race, and we're on the ballot already for about 65 or 70% of voters, and we intend to be on the ballot for about 95%. Both my campaign and the Libertarians are on the ballot as a real choice. The American people not only have a right to vote, we also have a right to know who we can vote for. And the debates should serve that public interest cause for real democracy.
Okay, let me ask you a more general question, a more human question, because there you are, running to be the next president of the United States. Give me an idea of what that is like, just the level of scrutiny, even the physical exertion of it.
It's it's a 22-hour-a-day job. It's, in my view, it's a wonderful opportunity. I'm a medical doctor, and I came to see that if we're going to fix the things that are literally killing us, we have to address our sick political system above all. And I began this process really about 15 years ago when I was recruited to start running for office by the Green Party, which, lo and behold, I didn't know anything about. It was actually a party that was advancing the same agenda that I was for people, for an environment, for jobs, for an economy that works for all of us. So, since I've begun this, to me it's a really wonderful, exciting, and very healing process by which we get to have a real conversation through the Green Party, because we're not funded, by the
you've made that
usual,
point. You've made that point several times. I mean, this campaign, I said it in the introduction, it's been the ugliest, the nastiest, the most divisive that many people can remember. How uncomfortable is America in 2016, do you think?
Extremely. I think America is rather desperate right now, and they're desperate for something different than what has been throwing them under the bus. Believe me, as an advocate for public health, for cleaning up our air and our water, these fights are not new to me. They are vicious. The fights that are sponsored by the industries that are trying to save their neck, they fight in a very underhanded way. So I'm completely accustomed to the kind of vicious attacks that are being launched against me. This is what it means to stand up and fight against a truly corrupt political system.
But you keep talking.
But in my view,
you keep
in
talking
this election,
about, in a sense, being an outsider. You want to be the most powerful politician on earth, and you're selling yourself as not being a politician. Does that make any sort of sense?
Well, let me just say, in this election, the American people are the outsiders, and it's the American people who are getting screwed. In this election, we're not just deciding what kind of a world we're going to have, but whether we're going to have a world or not going forward, not just on climate change, but on the new nuclear arms race. And Hillary Clinton wants to start an air war over Syria, declaring a no-fly zone against another nuclear armed power, Russia. Or you look at the massive and expanding wars. And this has really come home to roost now for the American people, who are really struggling. 1 out of every 2 Americans now is in poverty or low income. So it's a very personal struggle, not just for me. I have it easy compared to what most American people are fighting.
We are very nearly out of time. A final question, a final thought, because just about everybody agrees on one thing. This election represents probably the biggest choice that anyone can remember for generations in terms of the direction of travel for America, how America is governed. Isn't the truth of things that the Greens are simply a distraction from that fundamental choice that people have to make in November?
Well, I think the American people have something to say about that. If you look at what the American people are saying, they're saying no thank you to what the political establishment and the corporate media says. Oh, you be good little boys and girls. You have two choices, the guys that have created this absolute mess.
Okay.
The American people have had it with the rigged economy and the rigged political system. They are breaking out. If we don't offer them a progressive choice, we know where they're going, and that is to right-wing extremism. So it's very important. In order to combat right-wing extremism, we need to stand up for the right thing.
So he criticized her for wanting to ban fracking. He said, good for them to make them unemployed before employing them somewhere else. What? Did you even listen to what she said? What you just said about her is factually inaccurate. She's not just going to displace all of these workers. She is creating a Green New Deal so that way they have more environmentally friendly jobs that they can gravitate to once we do ban fracking. And his response was, sure. You have nothing else to say when she responds in a manner that's polite and actually completely corrects you and makes you look like a fool. That was really frustrating. And think about this. He's literally trying to attack her because she wants to ban fracking, a practice that destroys the environment and poisons our drinking water. See, I bet that if this host had a company fracking in his backyard and poisoning his drinking water and causing earthquakes where he lives, he'd have a completely different stance on fracking. But you know, out of sight, out of mind. If it doesn't affect me, then I could speak about it in a way that's condescending, and I don't have to care about other people. And furthermore, I want to play devil's advocate here. Let's say that Jill Stein was just going to ban fracking and not worry about the workers that would be displaced as a result of that. Should she still ban fracking? Yes, I think she should. Would that undoubtedly increase the unemployment rate and have deleterious economic consequences? Yeah, it would. But here's the thing. Do you want to know what would make the unemployment rate skyrocket to 100%? If we don't have a habitable planet to work on to begin with. You see, because in order for an economy to survive altogether, it has to be sustained on a planet. And the problem is that according to the World Value Survey, Americans believe that economic growth should take priority over protecting the environment. Not okay at all. And look, I get wanting to protect the economy. I don't want more poverty. I don't want people to be unemployed. And look, I'm not championing the idea that we should have these economic depressions as a result of dramatically changing the economy and, you know, banning fracking and whatnot. I think that Jill's approach is absolutely logical. She's saying we're going to transition the workers that are in these environmentally unfriendly careers into a green career where their job isn't going to harm the environment. And I'm in favor of that. But I think logically, it doesn't even make sense to say that the economy is more important than the environment. An economy cannot exist without an environment. If we don't have a planet, we don't have an economy, we don't have anything. We're all dead. It's nonsensical to me, yet a majority of Americans believe that. Now, of course, he also asked her about the cost of all of the programs, and I'm guessing that he wouldn't worry about the cost of war, though, because we only worry about the cost if we're actually helping citizens. But if we're killing brown people in the Middle East, you know, we'll put it on the credit card. It's fine then. It's so frustrating. He's going to all the right-wing tactics that we see in the United States. And you'd think that, you know, on BBC we'd get a different standard, but not at all. And he also asked her about military spending and how we can cut it in half when the world is so dangerous, and she explained it to him really well, but, you know, whenever she started to make too much sense, he had to cut her off because, you know, he doesn't want any of her talking points to resonate with viewers. So if someone is making sense, cut them off, because it's not about actually allowing Jill Stein a platform to talk about her policies. It's trying to make her look bad and vilify her. That was the whole point of this interview. Now, he also got irritated because she kept bringing up the fact that they're not funded by corporations, and he said, yeah, you've made that point several times. Right, and she should make it several more times because we're not even electing politicians anymore in America. We're electing a puppet. So for someone to come along and declare that there's no conflict of interest between their donors and their policy positions, that is huge. It can't be overstated. It's impossible. So for her to bring that up, she's doing a good thing. She needs to hammer that point home. Bernie Sanders did it, and she's correctly doing it. That's the strategy you need. See, rather than applauding her for that, though, this host just decided to dismiss her and imply that she's crazy because she wants to repeat herself. You're a crazy person. Look at this crazy person. She's repeating herself. Unbelievable. Now, he said, you're selling yourself as an outsider but campaigning to be the most powerful politician on earth. Does that make any sort of sense? See, nobody understands what a political outsider and a political insider is. Nobody can distinguish the difference between establishment and anti-establishment. The problem is that if you're going to be smug, you have to actually be knowledgeable, dude. Jill Stein won't automatically become an insider as president. She's an outsider because she's not a part of the corrupt political establishment where she takes bribes, does favors for her donors, and then gets out of office and then goes and becomes a lobbyist for the people that she worked for, who she did the bidding for in Congress. But overall, here's what I love about Jill Stein. She handled her own there, and she had the perfect response to any and every bullshit he tried to throw at her. See, anytime someone gets cut off because they're making sense, that's when you know there's an ulterior agenda behind what he's doing. See, he called her a distraction, but this distraction made him look like a fool on his own show. So it's not so much that Jill Stein is a distraction, it's that she might take votes away from the dominant political establishment, which is driving us into poverty, which is spawning wars across the globe that are illegal and unethical. And she's actually speaking out against it, but you don't want to hear what she has to say because you cut her off each time. But here's the thing. If you have to cut her off, you help Jill Stein because you show that you're afraid that what she's saying might actually resonate with viewers. It might actually resonate with the people who will be deciding this election. So they're going to do everything they can to try to vilify Jill Stein, but you can't do it because she's smooth, she knows what to say, she's articulate, and she could break down any bullshit argument you try to give her. So keep it up because it's only helping Jill Stein.